A midlife crisis is more than just a cultural stereotype. It's a real psychological struggle that can surface between the ages of 40 and 60. Often triggered by aging, loss, or unmet expectations, it can actually lead individuals to question their identity, make impulsive choices, or abruptly abandon long term commitments. While not officially classified yet as a mental illness, the emotional and relational fallout is very real, especially for the spouses and families left behind. This podcast gives voice to those living through the aftermath, exposing the hidden pain, and seeking accountability, healing, and understanding. Thank you for joining us today on MLC Bomb Drop and Beyond. Hey guys, welcome back to MLC Bomb Drop and Beyond. I was recently watching that movie, The Housemaid, and one character in particular left me totally unsettled and starting to do new research once again. And I don't want to, if you haven't seen the movie The Housemaid, you want to skip this episode and watch it later after you've seen the movie, because I don't want to, I don't want to ruin anything for you and give anything away. But anyway, there's a character in there, the husband, that it just is like, is he mentally ill? Is he psychotic? He seemed to be so calculating, manipulative, strategic, super cold. Is like, oh my God, he's the kind of person that can smile while destroying someone's life. And that got me thinking about a question that I hear and that we discuss a lot from left behind spouses. And that is, did my spouse lose their mind? What was going on? Was it a psychotic break, a mental break, a midlife crisis, a personality disorder, or did the mask simply fall off? And that really takes a lot of research. And I've been researching this for well over a year now, trying to, compare all the symptoms and trying to figure out which avenue, like my personal situation, like I think we all do. So today we're going to talk about that, one of the most uncomfortable questions in the entire bomb drop experience, because sometimes the answer isn't what we want it to be. Because when the bomb drops, nothing makes sense. The person you've known for decades suddenly changes. Your devoted husband becomes super selfish. Your devoted wife becomes cruel. The parent who once adored their children suddenly becomes distant and uncaring. They drop all their hobbies. They become different people. The person who preached loyalty and was totally against infidelity, now they are suddenly having an affair. The person who once condemned dishonesty begins lying with total ease and usually calculating and framing the other spouse. And you're sitting there going, oh my God, what happened? They have lost their mind. Are they having a psychotic break? But, the behavior is shocking and we just don't know what's going on. Many of you describe the same experience. The bomb dropper starts acting differently, dresses differently, talks differently, now has new values. They rewrite history. They become obsessed with a new relationship that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. They start to reject longtime friends and family. And we look at them and think, oh my God, who is this person? Because the familiar person seems totally gone. It's as if someone stepped into their body and replaced them. And that's why so many people use the words like, oh my God, they're possessed, they're brainwashed, they're lost, they're broken, they're unrecognizable. The transformation feels that dramatic because it is. But what if they didn't lose their mind? What if they were revealing parts of themselves that had always existed? And that possibility is much harder to accept because it may not be a temporary midlife crisis lasting, anywhere from 3 to 10 years. It may be a lifelong affliction that they have. Yeah, because the possibility of that is much harder to accept because illness feels easier. Illness feels explainable. There's treatment possibly for illnesses, and illness suggests recovery, but somebody's character, their personality, character and personality are different. There may not be change for that. A true psychotic break involves losing contact with reality. Somebody having a psychotic break or mental breakdown, they're going to experience hallucinations, delusions, severe paranoia, disorganized thinking. And a lot of us see that in the early stages in the first few months after Bob drop. Um, Hallucinations, paranoia, delusions, disorganized thinking. Our spouses genuinely believe things that are not real. But there are bomb droppers out there in MLC that don't quite fit that description. They do know who they are. They know where they are. They know what they're doing. They may be making terrible decisions. They may be chasing fantasies, but they generally understand reality. And that issue is not really psychosis. It's more like justification because they just are swept away, but in a temporary situation. One of the most fascinating aspects of the bomb drop is that whole rewriting of history. Suddenly, when they start saying, I was never happy, and you look at them and think, wait, we've been together 30 or 40 years and you're never happy? Or they start saying, I never really loved you. This new person I know, they understand me so much better than anyone ever has. And to you, the left behind, forward moving spouse, these statements can feel insane because you're rational and they are not. Things when they're saying that, they're contradicting decades of lived experience. You can look through photographs and cards. I even found cards that were purchased for me, to me for future events like our anniversary that was just days away from bomb drop. And it's like, wait, you look back on these and just, it's unexplainable. Going, how did they go from this to that? It's like you come home one day and your German Shepherd is all of a sudden a little tabby cat meowing. It's so drastic. And I know nobody really understands it except for those that have actually lived it and seen it because it is completely irrational. Anyway, they're sitting there constructing a story that allows them to do what they want to do without drowning in guilt. And that story becomes their emotional armor, as ridiculous as it is. But as a forward moving spouse, you sit there going, how much of this was always there? Maybe the selfishness was always there. Maybe their need for validation was always there. Maybe the lack of empathy was always there. Maybe the entitlement was always there. Perhaps it simply wasn't visible because life was stable. Responsibilities existed, expectations existed. Their mask remained firmly in place. But then the crisis arrives, and suddenly the mask became so much harder to maintain. And I don't believe midlife crisis magically creates cruelty. I think it reveals how someone handles pain. Some people become reflective. Maybe others will be accountable. They might seek therapy. Some maybe even become more compassionate. But there are a lot out there that blame, run, lie, and betray. The crisis may explain the behavior, but it doesn't necessarily excuse it. Many forward-moving spouses eventually arrive at what I think we can call the character revelation theory. Sort of like, well, the bomb drop didn't create a different person. The bomb drop revealed a side of the person that had been hidden. A lot of the bomb droppers in MLC genuinely suffer from depression. Some experience severe anxiety, untreated trauma. Some have substance abuse problems, and that accelerates things and makes it so much worse. Some may even experience psychiatric illness. But in many cases, what we're witnessing isn't madness, it's exposure. The curtain has been pulled back, and the view can be shocking because it forces us to question our entire history. And we start to think, if this side existed all along, why didn't we see it? How were we fooled? Were we manipulated? Were the good years just fake? These questions haunt many abandoned spouses. But here's what I've learned. A person can genuinely love you and still have serious character flaws. A person can be wonderful for years and still fail a major test later in life. And a person can wear a mask so long that even they forget where the mask ends and the real self begins. You guys, human beings are super complicated. And after years of trying to diagnose the bomb dropper, many listeners sit here and we discover we're asking the wrong question. And that question isn't, what's wrong with them? The question is, really, what do I do now that I've seen this? That's the big question you've got to put in front of yourself. What do you do now that you have seen this? Because once the mask falls, you cannot unsee it. Once you witness the lies, the cruelty, the indifference, the rewriting of history, something changes. You realize your healing cannot depend on their awakening. It certainly can't depend on their apology or their return. It must depend on you. Maybe your spouse had a midlife crisis. Maybe they were emotionally dysregulated. Maybe they were depressed. Maybe they were addicted to validation and chasing a fantasy. Maybe they revealed a side of themselves that you never knew existed. And you guys, the truth is that only they know the full answer. But here's what I do know, and that is you are not required to solve them in order to heal. You're not required to diagnose them in order to move forward. And you're not required to spend the rest of your life staring at the wreckage wondering what happened. Because whether it was a psychotic break or a character revelation, you know what? The result was the same. The blast happened, the mask fell, the illusion shattered. And now your task is not to rebuild them, but your task is to rebuild you. As always, Bomb Squad, stop chasing the blast, turn toward the light, and keep moving forward. And I'll see you in the next episode. Hey guys, this is Trina, and I want to take a moment to speak directly to anyone who didn't choose the collapse, but is living with the aftermath. When a spouse enters midlife crisis, the damage doesn't unfold slowly. It happens like an explosion. One day you're living a shared life with your best friend, and the next moment, that person that you have trusted and loved for so many years has emotionally disappeared almost overnight, rewriting history, minimizing the damage, and running from the very family they helped build. Friends are confused, the story gets simplified, and the spouse left behind is often expected to handle it quietly, gracefully, all while absorbing the fallout all alone. After the bomb drop, a survival guide for the left behind spouse was written for you. This book doesn't offer platitudes or false hope. It names what others avoid. Inside, I will walk you through what is actually happening when someone runs from themselves, why chasing answers only deepens the wound, and how to stabilize your life after emotional abandonment. In this book, we talk about why these departures feel so sudden and destabilizing, because in fact, they are destabilizing, and why the spouse who stays is often blamed, erased, or silenced, why saving yourself is not abandonment, and how to grieve someone who is still alive while finding your footing again. This book does not promise reconciliation. It offers you guys something more necessary at this time, and that is stability, dignity, and a way forward when someone else has chosen to run after the bomb drop. The Survival Guide for the Left Behind Spouse is available now on Amazon Kindle in both ebook and paperback. It's also available in audio version on Spotify. And if you're standing in the blast radius and wondering how to survive what you did not cause, this book was written for you. Hey, some resources that are available for you guys are thewifeexpert.com. That's Lori McDermott over there at thewifeexpert.com. She also has a new app out. There's tons of videos that can give you all kinds of information on no matter where you are on your MLC journey or trying to reconcile with your spouse. So check out thewifeexpert.com. And if you're not sure if your spouse or yourself is in maybe approaching or in a midlife crisis, be sure to check out Kenda Root's quiz at midlifecrisis marriageadvocate.com. Again, that's a midlife crisis, marriageadvocate.com. That's a quick little 2-minute quiz. It's free. So check that out as well. We have a ton of resources out there for you guys. So check them out. Thanks. Hey, if you have a story you'd like to share with our listeners, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please email mlcbombdrop@gmail.com. Again, that's mlcbombdrop@gmail.com. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon. The stories and events discussed in this podcast are for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or professional advice. Any names, locations, or identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. Any similarities to actual persons, living or dead, or real events are purely coincidental. The information presented on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. Always consult with a qualified expert regarding any decisions related to your specific situation. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the podcast creators.